Hey there, it's time for the show, the Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto. This episode of The Tatiana Show has been brought to you by eToro.com. You can trade in a wide range of assets, connect with the crypto community, and automatically copy top-performing portfolios at eToro.com. Quite simply, they have the top currencies, smart tools, low fees, social trading, all in one simple app. Connect with over 11 million eToro traders around the world using social feeds. eToro makes powerful trading tools easy. Get started in minutes right now at eToro.com. That's eToro.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tatiana Show. Today, we're going to be talking with Dee Bailey from GoCoin, and we're going to be talking a little bit about what happens if we have martial law, what happens with the military during these times of emergency crisis in the United States, a little bit about coronavirus. Hopefully, it's still timely. There's a lot of news coming out every day. I'm joined today not only by Dee, but by my co-host, Josh Shigala. So let's say hi to him first. Hey, Josh, how's it going over there with you and Voltoro and Corona? What's going on? How are you?
Good. Well, people are hedging in gold as they should, of course, both Bitcoin and fiat. And it's a crazy world. The thing is, it's going so fast. Everything's moving so fast. We're recording two shows at once. So, like you said, timely-wise, we'll see when this comes out. But right now, Italy's had 3 weeks of coronavirus, 3 cases 3 weeks ago, and now they're absolutely decimated. They can't function properly in terms of the hospital system. They're totally lacking, and we'll see what happens there. It's really sad, and I'm scared for all the cancer patients. They're like, no, we don't care, don't. They're just worried about these corona patients at the moment. So, of course, they do carry out cancer patients too, but they have to make a lot of really, really seriously terrible choices about who to save. And what a tragic thing to have to do as a doctor, someone that's trained to save lives, to make these choices. It's really what you don't want to get into. So hopefully the US won't get to that. But as far as I can see, it's the madness that's happening over there. I think hopefully the US isn't in this state as you're listening to it, but it definitely seems like there's nothing that you guys are doing that's stopping that, sadly.
Yeah, well, we've got a lot of actions being proposed, a lot of changes going on in the government. There's a lot of different approaches being taken by different countries all around the world. It's obviously a global issue. But we're going to talk with Dee right now. She's has a military background. She's going to tell us a little bit about, that kind of side, her qualifications in order to talk about this, some of her experience. Of course, she's from GoCoin. That's how I know her, from the crypto space. We also work together on Crypto Cares, which is sort of postponed right now until we figure out what's going on with virus. Thank you so much, Dee, for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's good. It's a good topic to be in on.
I'm sure, some people might know you from the crypto space, but I'm sure that they don't know about your many years in the Army. So if you could give us a little bit of background.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I actually joined the Army in 1998, a month after my 17th birthday. So I was a little one by the time I got up in there, and I was actually I joined as a medic. I was a medic my entire career. So I was one of those people trained to save lives. And then I volunteered to go to Bosnia. I was there when the war broke out. And then I invaded Iraq and went for OIF 2, and then came back stateside for a couple years, and then went and actually closed down Iraq. So my total experience includes 4 combat tours, to equal around 3 years at war, and then 18 years total time in the service. So I'm excited to get in on this topic because there's a lot of good information that, I can kind of pass on to everybody.
Okay, So let's dive right in here. What can we expect during a state of emergency, and what are the different levels that the military would get involved versus state law enforcement or even city law enforcement?
Yeah, so I think one misconception people have is a state of emergency is oh my God, we should all freak out. But when a state of emergency is declared, really all that does is kind of raises your threat level, or not threat level, but raises your the level of care and help and funds and things that you can get from the state and from the government. And so the reason that it was elevated was so that they could tap into those resources to handle the potential massive demand that this is going to put on our medical system. So I wouldn't necessarily, get all scared about it. And I think the media is doing a real poor job of explaining why these things are an emergency versus just hearing the word emergency,
Yeah, it's constantly about it's just the flu. Don't worry. That was what it was here for a while. It's obviously changed now to being a little bit more, hey, you guys should just slowly get a little bit prepared. But I don't think anyone was really prepared to see what Italy's going through.
No, and as much as we all want to believe, and as a government person, even I struggle with it sometimes, you want to think that everything has the best intentions, but we know that there's some tricky people out there that are going to use this situation to push their own agenda, right? And so while I think the majority have the greater good at heart, there's still some shady stuff we got to watch out for, like Tatiana was talking about earlier with guns and stuff going on.
Yeah, that's the thing. So when do they start taking away constitutionally authorized rights? Like there's our Bill of Rights, we've got our Constitution, we've got all these kinds of rules of law that seem to be suspended whenever there is some kind of an emergency, right? After 9/11, we lost a whole bunch of rights. I mean, is there something in the immediate that we can anticipate? I'm sorry, I don't know the name of the city, but there was a city that said, oh, we're not selling guns anymore because of coronavirus, which I thought, hold on there, Buster Brown. I'm not sure that you can do that, but maybe they can. What's your experience with that?
Well, I think the first thing is, where are the guns coming from, right? So if it's a China export, you have to consider that aspect of it. The other thing is, if they saw like a sudden spike in gun sales, they have a little bit of an obligation to protect us, right? To make sure that all of a sudden people aren't arming up and running around. And because in this mass hysteria, the secondary things you have to think about is, what if riots start, right? Like what if now all these businesses are closed and people are home? That's opportunity for people to get robbed and things get looted. And so it's kind of like a chicken and the egg. They're trying to anticipate and foresee any and everything bad that could happen and then get ahead of it before it happens.
Right, but legal gun sales are not going to be the point of concern. I would think that it's people getting guns illegally that would be maybe more likely to be criminals. I mean, I think that if there's something scary going on, we should be able to get a gun, even if there is riots going on. Well, it's not my fault there's a riot. I would like to be protected. I guess that would be the counter to that.
But the thing is, it's about desperation, right?
Yet.
It's about desperation. If you're running out of food and you've got a starving family, and there's a deli down the road that's empty of people and it's full of meat and stuff to eat, and you're literally starving. I mean, what do you do?
Right, or the number one rule of war was, if you want to win a battle, it's fire superiority, right? So if all of a sudden everybody in the U.S. has a gun, we could literally overthrow the government because we could outpower them. So there's just a lot of different angles.
Such a bad thing?
No.
Is that their job to prevent us from doing that? I mean, would that be the purview of the military to prevent people from rising up against a tyrannical government in the first place?
No. So here's where it gets really interesting, right? Between the National Guard and the U.S. Army is the U.S. Army cannot function within the U.S. We're allowed to do different jobs where we can be activated federally, right? So if it was a state issue, the U.S. Army is not really allowed to participate in state issues. We would have to be federally activated in order for them to utilize us. So the National Guard could come in state by state, right? If the governor saw the need to use them for that reason, they would. But I think where a lot of people misunderstand is, we're not trained to go out there and assassinate every single person that we come across, right? And we have to be more humane than pretty much anybody else I've ever come up against. And so it's going to take a lot to get us activated. But if it's not like that movie Outbreak where everybody has their guns, or in China where they're dragging you and beating you up. We treat people humanely. We would get in trouble for acting like that. And I know that there's videos and footage of people who do things like that, but just so you understand, we have our own justice system, right? So if you go into a court of law in the military and you're found guilty of a court martial, you're automatically a felon and you go to prison for a really long time. So we don't have the same rights. It's very different. So we would have to act humanely. We would have to treat people with respect. We would, you know what I mean? And we're trained to do it. We're trained to handle these situations because it's what we do.
I don't buy it. I don't buy it.
People.
With all due respect.
That's fine. That's fine. You don't have to.
Okay, let's go dark here. What if, and not that you're the representative of all Army people, and the interesting thing and why I was really happy to have you on this show is, I look at some of your posts online and it seems like we're pretty aligned politically, but then sometimes I see these sort of divergences, but it's an interesting perspective because you are there on the ground. How do you think that now you guys are trained to be dealing with enemies. How do you think the military and the police would interact if there was civil unrest in the United States? Like, why would they not all of a sudden start treating us maybe with an antagonistic attitude? How we've seen, there's like some police brutality issues, of course, that really don't get penalized. So that kind of sends a message to the people and to the police officers, at least with the news that I'm seeing, that, you kind of get away with that. And I know that the police officers are not the same as the Army, but sometimes they say that they're trained in a military fashion. And so that's not a good sign so far. So how do you know that they wouldn't necessarily start maybe, honorably killing people in the street? Like maybe they'll only shoot them in the head and not torture them to death. I mean, stranger things have happened. How can somebody in the United States feel comfortable and not feel like an antagonistic feeling toward these people who are, let's say, just doing their jobs and maybe do have good intentions?
Well, I think a lot of that just comes from your experience, right? So am I ever going to make the two of you comfortable with anything that happens? No, because you don't have my experience. Would I be comfortable with it? Sure, because I walked around Bosnia in cities, in the Publix with an M16 and a 9mm to my hip and full battle rattle and didn't kill anybody. So I was there to protect people, right? So I just have a different experience than you guys do. But
did you see any corruption?
Oh, of course. Corruption's everywhere. I'm not going to say that the military is without fault, not by any means. I do think the police department is a lot worse than us. I have friends that are cops and their mentalities and the cover-ups I've seen. A lot of stuff that goes on with them would not fly in the military. And now you have cameras everywhere, so you're really not getting away with anything.
I think the thing that worries me is that a lot of people, and I really don't want to be classist, but a lot of people that get picked up to be in the military are originally from lower socioeconomic areas who have had real problems in their youth, and how do you train that out of someone if they've been beaten by their dad their whole life, and then they're suddenly in charge of an M16 and just pissed off, and someone's not doing as they're told, and they just sort of go back to that sort of attitude. Of course, these are very generalized comments that I'm saying here. Of course, it's ridiculous. I can throw any sort of argument out there, and it's hard.
I don't know. I mean, Dee, you actually have something about this because you had a little bit of a troubled past before going into the military, and it straightened you out. You said, right? Gave you some structure. That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, that does happen too.
Yeah, it's definitely a two-sided. So here's one perspective, right? The military was much different before the economic crash and before this war, right? For many different reasons. The way we trained, the way we operated, the way we thought. And what happened was when 2008 and the crash happened, people who were very intelligent started joining the military because it was the only job out there. So yes, 100% people with bad past and honestly, now that I'm out and I have a different perspective, and I can truly see like how the military is used to fight a rich man's war, and how much they abuse, not just in the military, but the US as a whole pushes down and holds down the lower economic classes, right? Like, it's very transparent to me why that gap between the top 40 and the bottom 60 has grown. Sorry, I'm actually sick right now, so bear with me a little bit. Why that gap has gotten so big. But in 2008, you had all these really intelligent people join, and PTSD was at its highest, right? Because we've been at war for a while, and we've all seen some crazy things, and it's messing us all up. So the thought process was, how do we get ahead of it? And they started taking like a sports psychology approach, and teaching people how to break down their thoughts. And so while you would think that you're in the Army and it's like kill, 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 in reality, the Army puts a lot of time and effort into making you the most effective, adaptive, like high volume processing person that you can be, because you have to be able to operate and perform and function in a high tense environment for a long period of time, right? So there's just so much more than like killing that we learn. For example, the Army could completely handle the medical system, or assist in handling the medical system, because we're trained in biological warfare, right? That's training we have to do every year. We practice it. We go through decontamination. We set up things. The Army has a Roll 2 hospital that they can set up, right, collapse, move, reset up, and be fully functional within 24 hours. Like, we're just very highly trained. But that's the side that people don't hear about so much.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I wanted to kind of give a little bit of some fair time to some of the benefits. I mean, look, if we've got a military, I guess the whole point of what you're saying is that our military is good, but, or in terms of, or more civilized. But did you notice like a dissatisfaction among your brethren for the 140 bases or whatever, or countries that we have bases in around the world? I mean, does that not seem a little bit excessive to everybody? Does nobody figure that out until it's too late? I mean, don't they think that this is a little bit hot to trot? Or do you think that it's a lot of kids that are maybe watching some movies that make them think it's going to be one thing? I mean, how does that work? Because it just seems obvious, like a big money suck to me. But I mean, I'm older than them, so maybe that's why.
Yeah. So it's interesting, because we could all say that, but we're very strategic in what we do, and there's a reason why we're there. And yeah, everybody's fine. Like, okay, so let's all pull back from Iraq, and let's all pull back from Afghanistan, and let's all pull back this positioning. But let me ask you this: if we pull back from Afghanistan and Iraq, how close are we if Russia wants to go to war? How close are we if Iran wants to go to war? How close are we if China wants to go to war, right? And those are three.
Well, we're the biggest warmongers. We're literally the biggest war people. We have the most weapons. Who's going to go to fight with us? They'd have to be idiots. Why would they do that?
I don't know that we're the biggest war. We've declared war on what? Iraq and Afghanistan. But we were dragged into World War II.
Well, we have like the biggest military out of anybody by several times in the world. I mean, that's one of the things that they always show us. Oh, the U.S. has the most by far in terms of military might than other countries.
Yeah, you know what's interesting too is the U.S. is the only all-volunteer military in the world as well. So every single person that's in the military volunteered to do it. Whereas other countries, it's mandated. Like Germany, you have to serve 2 years. If you're a German citizen, you have to serve either 2 or 4 years in the German army.
Not anymore. They scrapped it. But yeah, up until recently. Yeah, up until recently, yeah.
But Josh, is that where you're out of?
Yeah, I'm in Berlin here, so there's a lot of US GIs here, and like you said, very like the US people are generally very nice, lovely people. I have no problem at all with the US folk, and the servicemen I've come across have always been wonderful as well. I'm just I just think that it's far too over the top that the US is just everywhere in terms of their might, and it's dangerous for the US because they're seen as this sort of aggressive world cop sort of thing. And you know, there's of course resource issues and all these other things that come into play. It's a very, very complex topic, and you can't just sort of blanket things. But I think it's really interesting to have someone like you come on the show and talk about the benefits. And like, well, you know, what's really surprising is how self-sustaining it is, and that people can come along and just pop up a hospital. But let me ask you, what happens when thousands of people overrun the US hospital system? Will they be able to handle that? I mean, do they have thousands of respirators they could just suddenly pop up with in terms of hardware?
Yeah, so a lot of that is the decisions that they're trying to get ahead of right now. I can tell you that any state that activates their military sources, that we have to have on hand all of the medical supplies per regulation per soldiers that we have to support, right? So if I have to support 1,000 soldiers, maybe regulation says I have to have, 2 ventilators on hand per whatever. So, and those, we have to do inventory on them. They're never expired. They're always up to date. And so they could tap into those resources. As I've seen that the government has actually partnered with civilian sectors, which I don't know if I'm for or against, but they're moving quickly. So I guess it's a good thing. But how quickly can the civilian sectors tap into their resources as well, right? And again, anything that's coming out of China is obviously going to put a big hold on us, which we get a lot of our stuff from, especially, plastics and medical supplies, pharmaceuticals, like, because it's just so cheap to make it in China. And now that entire system is going to be choked a little bit. So could they handle it? Yes, they could. Will they? I'm not sure. Timing plays a lot as well, right? So if 10 people show up on a Friday night and they all need respirators, and I don't get them until Sunday, then obviously that's going to be the issue. But if 2 people show up every day and I get 10 over a 5-day span period, then that's going to ease it a little more for me. So that's really why it's the state of emergency, is because the media is causing this hysteria. And I have a cold, or I've been sick. I have a little bit of a fever. I have a cough, and everybody's like, go get tested, go get tested. But there's only so many test kits, and they're used really for more of monitoring severe cases and the spread of the virus. So, and I don't want to get quarantined in some government facility. Like, I've already done that for a while. I'm all good. I'd rather just sit at home for 14 days and lick my wounds, right? Like, people get intimidated by it, and then they tax the resources unnecessarily, and it causes a bigger issue than it needs to be.
I think that's like some level-headed advice right there. What do you think that people can do to maybe lower the antagonistic feeling? I mean, do you think people are going to be frustrated if there is more involvement? Or do you think people are going to, I think people are going to take it. They're going to be happy for the help. In this case, it does seem like there's a reason to have some army presence around. I don't know. I guess we'll see.
The medical support, sure. Do I want to see any towns quarantined with Humvees and guns? Like, I think that would freak people out a little bit. I think if we get to that point, it's going to start turning a little hairy, right? Because now you do have all these armed people, and if the military tries to come in with guns, we've got guns. My guns are bigger than your guns. Like, I can shoot you on my property. It'll get interesting to see if that breaks out.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, what will these people do if they're forced against their countrymen? I don't know if that would happen, but I do wonder how their training would be, because if they're just supposed to do whatever the government tells them, but these are their friends and neighbors, and people might be freaked out. I hope it doesn't come to that. I don't know. We gotta talk about this on Prepper Madness.
Yeah, I don't think it would come to that at all. I think. So one thing, Josh, just so you know, I lived in Würzburg for 4 years, which I loved. I'm such a big fan of Germany. It's an amazing place. But the U.S. and the U.S. military are the best trained in the world. So we already know how to handle this. We already know what we need to do. We're just trying to get ahead of it and trying to educate people so they're not freaking out. And the media just doesn't help. I actually like not watching TV and not looking at Facebook, because then my world is peaceful again.
Very good point.
just head over to MySpace. You'll have some, peace and quiet.
So let you
MySpace.
touched on this a little bit. So you touched on this a little bit. What do you think of private contractors being used versus standard military people?
Yeah, that was super frustrating to me. Sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't. When we invaded Iraq, we brought a lot of civilian contractors in, but literally there would be a guy. So we have a thing called MWR, which is morale, welfare, and recreation. And the idea is you have to give soldiers some entertainment and some ways to release. Otherwise, the constant fatigue of the stress of being at war can be very overwhelming. And so they would have like the gym or events. Like one time in Iraq, we did a fashion show, and this guy was there, and he was paid $60,000 a year tax-free just to manage that, and I was making $23,000 a year to be full-fledged at war, right? And I'm like, that's a little messed up to me. Yeah.
But do you get long-term benefits that he doesn't get? Maybe that would be factored into it.
Oh yeah, for sure. I full-on get a paycheck from now for the rest of my life. And I don't have to do anything for it. So, you know what I mean? I don't even have to work. I just do it because I love it and I love money. So, and I love crypto. And I'd like to see crypto do great things.
Yeah.
Well, we're lucky to have you in the community. That's for sure.
Yeah. So in terms of if the military was to come in, what has to happen? Because it seems to me like, look, the US has, I watch the presidential debates and all this, not debates, sorry, when as Trump comes out and starts, talking about all the plans of Corona and what's going to happen, but it all just sounds like a big movie, and they just sort of, I don't know, it just seems talk. It's just a lot of talk, because when I read the news and all the stuff that's happening, where they're just letting thousands of people in from Europe, everyone's stuck in crowds at O'Hare Airport, and there's no test kits, and I just think, man, it's gonna hit hard there. What does it take to get the medical side of the army in, to lend a hand? What does it take? Just a signature from the president, or what?
Yeah, so this goes back to who activates them. So if it becomes a national emergency, the president can activate the U.S. Army to operate within the U.S. and do whatever functionalities. The governor can, each state that's declaring a state of emergency, that enables them to tap into the National Guard to start utilizing resources there. I've also seen that they're expediting certifications for anybody who's ever held a medical certification in anything. So like my EMTs lapsed. That's the other thing in the Army is, during the war, one of the things that changed was you had to maintain a U.S. certification in order to be certified in your military occupational specialty in the Army. So if you were a nurse, you were a nurse in the military and outside. If you were a medic, you were a medic in the Army and in the civilian side. What's interesting is on the Army side, when we're working with DOD, not necessarily civilians, but like military people, our scope of practice is 10 times bigger than what I can do in the civilian side. So, for example, as a medic in the Army, I'm more trained like a physician's assistant than I am an EMT on the different sides. So for one, you're going to get very, very highly trained people, especially if they've deployed or been in for a minute. And then once, as these hospitals get overwhelmed, the individual states will activate their National Guard first. And then if it becomes a national emergency, I could foresee the president activating the military. But more than likely what they'll do is just allow people to start utilizing military facilities, right? So we have our own functional hospitals on post as well. In fact, a lot of the quarantine places are medical military facilities because we're trained to handle it, right? So I would, rather than seeing people out in the streets or like a pop-up tent of a hospital somewhere, I would just see an influx of personnel that would go in to rotate out into the hospitals, and them allowing people to come in to use the military facility.
What's the point of all this technology without a little love in our lives? Our hosts, Tatiana Moroz, Dr. Stephanie Murphy, and Lauren Kasovitz, have come together to bring you Proof of Love. Go to proofoflovecast.com.
How much do you think this is a bioweapon? Do you think it's a bioweapon?
I do. I do. I'm not. I just think that every now and then somebody does something stupid to like weed out the herds. I think that big business has a huge agenda to push stuff like this. My mentality though is it really my job to figure out where it came from? No, not so much. My job is to take care of my family and take care of anybody around me that gets sick. So I don't put too much effort into the conspiracy theories, but I 100% believe they're possible.
I'm the same. I'm like, my wife, she's like, oh, it's this and that. And I just think right now, I don't care where it came from, what it is, if it's from a bat or if it's from a lab. I want to prepare and I want to be safe and I want my kid to be safe. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you see the Harvard chemist or the guy that got arrested for working at Wuhan and not disclosing his Chinese payments to the U.S. government?
I did read something about that. Yeah, that was pretty extraordinary. And then there was also some Chinese chemist that was working in Canada at a lab, at a secure bio lab, and then went back to Wuhan, which has like around about 50 k's away or something like that from where the wet markets were. And the only lab that China has got is right there. It just all seems very sus. Plus, a lot of them aren't paid very well, so they would sell some of the animals that the wet market's been seen before. So yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. I was just gonna say, you get corruption in pretty much any industry, right? So I think the hard part is when people think that the services are here to protect them are the most corrupted. Look, biochemists are corrupt, crypto's corrupt, right? Like each entity has its own element. I wish people saw us more as a service, and I know that the police and war doesn't necessarily help, but that for us, that's what we're trained to be. We're not trained to be the assassins. We're trained to be of service to the people.
Yeah, I just wish that the U.S. military would have gone harder at actually prosecuting some of the war crimes that have been leaked through WikiLeaks or through any of the leaks that have happened. It doesn't matter where they came out from, and people would then take it a little bit more serious instead of being scared of them. It's like with police, if there's no sort of real consequences for police just shooting or police violence, then people start being so scared of the police that they don't even call them. And this is what I think is happening in America over the years, is that people are just scared of the police and of the military and of authority in general.
Yeah, I'm curious. Why do you think that some of those war crimes didn't get prosecuted?
I mean, I've still yet to see a prosecution of the events that happened in that WikiLeaks leaked of the drones dropping the bombs on those photographers and wedding people or whatever they were. Again, I can't talk too much of it, but I think this is the general vibe that this stuff isn't really publicly talked about enough. And me as a general consumer of media isn't seeing the hard hand of the law. It's more like all I'm seeing is them going after Julian Assange, who was like the messenger. And whatever you think of him, whether you think he's good or bad, it's not really to say. What is to say is the info that was leaked was like, man, that's pretty messed up. Some heads have got to roll somewhere.
Yeah, so Tatiana and I have actually touched on this a couple of times. My personal issue with Assange is when he dropped that whole WikiLeaks thing, I was in Iraq and he put my life in jeopardy, right? And while I don't agree with the things that happened, and I agree that those should be prosecuted, at the same time, I didn't do it. So why are you going to try and get me killed over it, right? I think maybe. But
if you're in Iraq, you're probably going to you're there to get, you're pretty likely to get killed over there anyway. Like, it's not like, that you're in more danger, realistically, right? I mean, even now, like the US, that video that went viral of this soldier, and he said, what would happen if I went out in the street now? Well, the Iraqis would capture you and probably behead you and show you on a video, and that's just the civilians. It's not even ISIS. And it's like, man, far out. Like it's just a dangerous situation. It's not like that made it more dangerous.
Yeah, so I'm going to disagree with that a little bit. I've walked on the streets of Iraq and had people in the homes and not felt danger, right? There's an element of danger and there's an element of not danger. The danger is not in the Iraqi people. The Iraqi people don't hate us. They were very grateful that we came and got rid of Saddam because he was performing genocide on them, right? But then you have to deal with ISIS and all of the issues that are going on over there and how they affect the Iraqi people, like kidnapping an Iraqi family and making a guy plant a bomb to blow up the US military. Like they do stuff like that, right? So then the question is, who's the bad guy? Is it the US or is it the ISIS? Because we follow the Geneva Convention and the rules of war, and ISIS just does whatever they want to because they can. And so there was times that I did feel like it was fine in Iraq and that people weren't going to hurt me. But when you start releasing things that, like, for example, did you walk away from reading that feeling good about the U.S. military?
After Assange's leaks?
Yeah.
Oh no, I mean, but you shouldn't. I mean, if there's an atrocity, like if there's someone murdering some children, I want the world to know about it. If it's an atrocity, it should be known. Like as the Nazis were killing off people here in Germany, the media should be leaking that shit. Like whether you're in the German side or not, I'm not definitely not comparing the American army to the Nazis. I'm just saying that generally, if there are atrocities, you want there to be this transparency. Of course, people will argue, look, you can't give away, where locations are and things like this, for sure. But if there are atrocities, they have to be heard. Otherwise, things just go unchecked and just unchecked, and then it goes down a slippery slope. And I'm not sure. It's just builds that distrust over time, and that's sad because really you don't want more people to die because of this distrust, this hatred.
It just didn't seem like those things would have been such a big deal to reveal if they had already been taken care of. You know what I mean? It didn't seem like anybody got in trouble for it. And I don't think that either Josh or I know specifically what ended up happening with those cases. We're just talking about it more broadly because of, seeing Assange for many years and following along. But I doubt that either of us have looked down that rabbit hole. The thing is that people don't trust the military. It's bad that other people in the military are getting into trouble, but from what I understand, it's never even been testified that there were specific people that were put in danger. In fact, that some people had testified that unfortunately to their, they didn't want to necessarily say this, but they said that actually nobody ended up getting in trouble, which, or getting hurt, which I guess is something to be thankful for. It doesn't mean that it couldn't have happened, but as a point of pride as an American, I don't want to hear about people doing really evil things in the army. And I think the army usually gets a very good, representation in the press. I don't think that people expect that from our armed service members. So I don't know. I mean, I can see both sides of the argument there. Have you ever seen any kind of evidence that Assange's revelations did put people specifically in danger?
No, I mean, to be honest with you, I was in Iraq when all that happened. So I'm not, so there's a couple different things, right? You have to have a very specific mentality in order to do what you do in the military. And that's not like the kill hurt mentality. It's this is my job, this is my mission, and this is my job, and this is my mission. And anything that's going to detract from me to be able to do my job or do my mission is something that's not going to be good. Now, when you're a senior leader, when you're higher up and you're actually responsible for soldiers and soldiers' lives, and it's very difficult to keep your head in the game day in, day out. So to a degree, I purposely don't watch a lot of negative publicity or negative things about the military, and I don't inundate myself with the things like every single person who gets prosecuted or, like, this happened. So I didn't follow it. I didn't follow it because at that point in time, I had bigger missions and things that I had to do. But I can tell you from personal experience, one, if it's made public, it was definitely investigated one way or another, right? So anytime something comes out like that, the first thing, because the higher ups are like, we have to do damage control, who's responsible, who are we going to hold accountable, and like, if it wasn't already done, it needs to be done now. So that's number one. Number two, the military is real quick to prosecute you. We don't like shelter each other from it like the police do. You have an obligation if there's like, if somebody gives you a command that's a war crime, you have an obligation to not do it, and you can be prosecuted even if it comes from somebody else, right? So we're held to a higher standard because, right, like we're trained more, we're taught more, we're prepared more, so we're expected to act more accordingly in those situations. Now, what's unfortunate is anytime you have humans involved in things, there's going to be error. And I'm not in any way saying that it's okay, and I'm not saying in any way that I condone it, but it happens. It's just the reality of war. War is not pretty. It's not fun. It's not, it's not common. It's not normal. It's crazy, and it's messed up. And messed up things happen in war, and the American public couldn't handle it. They just don't have the same mentalities to understand. What people probably don't realize is one of the things that ISIS did was strap bombs to kids and send them toward soldiers, right? But they never tell you that. And then what do? Let the kid run all the way up to you and then blow up your squad and kill your base or infiltrate your base so that ISIS can come in and overtake it. And yes, there have been people who have shot kids, and I've actually had to counsel a lot of those guys because they ended up with severe PTSD because that's not normal. That's not okay. Right.
My God.
Then, right. But that's the stuff that people don't want to hear. That's the stuff that but imagine being that guy in that situation. What do you do? Right. And so it's hard to say until you're there, but I think that it's handled a lot more than you think it is. And I think it's investigated a lot more than you think it is. And I also think that, Tatiana, you and I have talked about this. The government is like, the military gives out some harsh punishments. I dated a guy when I came back from Iraq, and he beat me up and put me in the hospital. And that guy got 7 months in prison. Like, he is a felon, and he got 7 months in prison. What do you think would have happened on the U.S. side? And by the way, within a month of the incident, he was in jail, in prison, convicted, done. Your career's done, right?
Thank God.
So,
that's great news. Yeah.
That's wild. I've heard different prosecutions that did happen quickly with other kinds of happen to be female friends, but yeah, that there does seem to be some sort of swift justice in certain situations. So I appreciate, the perspective that maybe that's the exception and not the rule. What do you guys, I'm just making a representative for all the military, but what is the military take on Trump, and what would happen if Biden got in? Because Trump seems to be pulling back on some of the wars. I would say that's a thumbs up. I mean, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so just a rule of thumb, most of the military, everybody has their own opinions, but Republicans are pro-military and Democrats are not. So anytime you get a Republican in the office, we get pay raises.
Fooled me.
Right? Well, that's the thing is there's just a lot of information out there. There are people who want to take over America. There are people who want to kill us. There are people who want to do harm to us. And that's just how it is, right? And so our government has access to that information a lot more than we do. And, I love Trump. I love Trump just because as soon as they attacked the embassy, he dropped a bomb on that guy. And it was like, that's why you don't mess with the U.S. I know that people are going to be like, oh, that's not fair. That guy died. He got killed. But he was also one of the biggest proponents of building improvised explosive devices that came out of Iran that blew up a lot of my friends and myself, right? And so the fact that Trump was like, nope, you're not going to mess with us, you're out. And what's happened since then? There was no retaliation. They shot a couple rockets at us. They're capable of a lot more than that. So everybody in the military has their own opinion, but whenever there's a Republican, they just do a lot more for us.
So would they respect Hillary or Biden? I mean, would there even be any kind of preference, or would both of them just be met with scorn? Because that seems almost a little bit dangerous to switch lanes. I don't know. I mean, do you think that there should be some kind of more war because of the Russia-Saudi Arabia thing?
No,
The oil wars?
More war is never good. More war is never the answer. I'm not a big
Well,
proponent of war.
obviously, none of us are, but do you think that there would be a greater chance now because of some of these difficulties around the oil supply? And do you think that if there was a Joe Biden that came in, do you think that that would be more disruptive? Because, I mean, they know what they're getting with Trump, so I don't know. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to beat Trump. We'll see what happens, but do you think that the military would be okay with a different presidential candidate at all?
Yeah, it's just going to go back to personal preference, but we don't have a choice. Whoever gets elected is our commander in chief, and they are the senior ranking person of the military, and every single one of us will respect them or will go to jail. Like, you're not allowed to sit there in the military and go off about the president. That's your commander in chief, right? That is the senior person. And so, there was times when my soldiers would have opinions and would voice opinions, but I go back to the mentality of, is your opinion and what you're saying right now helping us or this section do our job better? And if it's not, then why don't you just keep that for some other place?
What about the war is a racket piece? Remember General Smedley Butler? He did that really long piece. I think it was, I don't know, maybe in the 40s or something, called War is a Racket. And he had kind of really been through the thick of it. He was this very decorated military guy, and it's a very famous piece. Have you read it before?
Actually, I haven't.
That's amazing.
Oh, I would really, it's amazing. So this guy, he has this really incredible history. I wish I was better at remembering details. I remember overarching ideas, but details not so much. Anyway, he had been invited by the bankers to storm Washington. I mean, he was wild. And so then he wrote this huge thing destroying the military. I guess I wonder, I like the discipline that you get out of people in the military. I think that the people there think that they're doing a good job. But I just don't understand why they don't think that, I mean, maybe it's just a really good job opportunity for people, But like I figured out that the military wasn't good. I figured out, war is not so awesome. I'm just surprised to see so many people turning to it. And you bring up a very good point that people are volunteering to be in there. Do you think it's propaganda? Like, what do you think? Is it just a family tradition? Is it the values purported by the military that appeal to people? What do you think it is?
Well, I can tell you, for me personally, my mom made me join the Army, right? So I was like that troubled kid who was probably going to die if I didn't make a drastic life change. And after my 17th birthday, she's like, all right, you're going down, you're joining the Army. And she made me do it. And what was really fascinating was the first thing I learned in basic training was mind control, right? So they bring in like 60 people in this tiny little room, and they'd be like, oh, we're going to make it rain tonight, which means they're going to work us out so hard that we're going to sweat, and the steam from us is going to collectively go onto the ceiling and then drip back down on all of us, right?
That's nasty, man.
Yeah, it is. Well, yeah, enjoy the suck. And that's after working out and 3 meals and rifling and walking, and right, that's the end of the day. That was the last thing you did. And so you're exhausted, and I'm working out, and I noticed that in my mind, whenever I paid attention to what was hurting or how much it sucked or how miserable I was, it made it very difficult to stay up and do what I needed to do in the exercises. But the second I got motivated and got excited and was happy to be there and happy to be changing my life and happy to have something new and it's honor and it's prestigious, and right, like if I could get into that mindset, I could work out all day. It was like, bring it on. I'm not even scared, right? And they embed these. They have ways of making you learn these different mentalities that they need you to be a high functioning person. And when you're in the military, it's very, for people who like rewards-based system, it's very geared towards that. So it's clear what you need to do for promotions. There's a lot of competitions you can do. There's badges you can earn. You put them all on a uniform that they make you wear in front of everybody, and the more stripes you have and the more badges you have and the more ribbons you have. And like, you look at somebody who's like, wow, that person's a badass, right? And so they're very good at getting into your head and challenging you and then teaching you how to overcome those challenges. For me, I liked that system, and it's actually something that I can take into business and I can replicate, because I'm used to being thrown into hard situations with nothing and told to figure it out and make it happen anyways. And then, you get free college. I've already gone to almost 4 years of school. I don't have a degree because I just studied whatever I needed to know at the time. So from psychology to exercise science to marketing to sports marketing, and now finance. And I still have 6 more years of college I can use for free. Right?
Wow.
I mean, it's insane. I'm thinking about going and getting my PA license. I have a free paycheck for the rest of my life. You never have to worry about a paycheck ever. So for 18 years of my life, I was paid every 2 weeks like clockwork and never had to worry about it. Right? Didn't matter if I worked, didn't matter if I didn't work. Like, that paycheck was there. It was solid. It was steady. I had healthcare. I had dental.
Sounds like a communist socialist system.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Just shut up and obey.
Yeah. So why do you think, Ron Paul, when he was running back in, when was it, 2008, something like that? When was it?
2012.
2012.
2008 as well, but 2000.
Yeah. I remember the 2008 one, and one of the biggest revenue sources was military personnel sending money to this, relatively unknown at the time guy from the Libertarian Party. So it was very interesting to see.
He wasn't that unknown, actually. He was pretty known by 2012. He had the most donations out of any military. Like, the military supported him more than any other candidate. And I remember that because I didn't know any people from the military. I grew up in Jersey, and I don't know, I just didn't know a lot of people. And so that was actually quite interesting for me to get a different perspective.
Yeah.
We said the military was the biggest contributors to Ron Paul. Is that what you guys were saying?
Military service members of the military. Yeah, he had more support than anybody else, and this was quoted everywhere. I actually went with one of my first gigs that I did was in front of over 1,000 different people, and they were all veterans, and it was the Veteran Support Ron Paul, and we all marched up to the White House, and they turned around because they were commemorating the suicide. It's for every suicide they were silent or something. It was like a whole big thing. It was quite moving, really powerful, because there were just so many people. But it was a tagline that I had heard referenced in a lot of different news things from that time. So I don't think it's fake. I think it's verifiable, because I think at different points I looked it up because I was making signs.
Yeah, but sure. But in what population did they, like, it was the most military supporters in the state of Colorado? It was the most military supporters worldwide?
All of them.
Just
worldwide,
the country, though?
Yeah.
Like, but that's the thing.
US military.
Did they really say it? Or did they, because they could say, oh, Ron Paul was the biggest contributor of the U.S. military, and leave out the geographical area that they're isolating this study to, and it's still a valid statement, right? Like,
no, because nobody ever pushed back on that, and they were just looking for things to make fun of him for. I mean, we can look it up. The listeners can look it up and post it to our tweet. And
sure. I would say it's funny because I'm not a big fan of him because he dodged the draft, right? Like, I don't know. Not that I thought that everybody should be in that war, but
draft, he went in and he was a medic for some kind of he served.
Ron Paul
served. Yeah, Ron Paul served.
Oh, well, then maybe that's why. I felt like when I saw his speech at the Nexus conference that he said that he had dodged the draft.
No, I don't think so. Well, either way, I'm sure many of the fans will find out. I don't want to get too far off the weeds. We can start looking it up, but not that I know of. From what I understand, he went in and served And that was one of the things that people liked about him. He went in as a doctor.
No, I just wanted to quickly bring it back to why I brought up Ron Paul was because I think a lot of service members were also tired of all the just being in these different conflicts all the time, and now in Syria, and just on and being stationed. We still got the US has still got stations off of Japan, and I mean it's like this massive ordeal, and I think a lot of servicemen are like, man, why?
Yeah, I agree. We're burnt out, right? Like,
Yeah.
you have to think Obama severely cut the military a lot, but they didn't decrease the work. So that just means we had to work twice as hard, and we got burnt out. So, they have rotations where it's like year on, year off, year on, year off. But the problem is that year off, you're still going through everything from coming back from deployment, doing all your training that you have to do, gearing back up to redeploy again, and then going for a whole nother year. And on top of whatever additional duties they give you back at your home station. So the people just got burnt out. We were tired of it. The other thing is we went in and overtook two countries and tried to rebuild them on Western policies, which just don't work over there. And I think a lot of people got frustrated with the time spent there, and we just didn't think they were moving as fast as we needed them to, which, it's not exactly easy to rebuild a country and a government, let alone do it, in two different countries at the same time. And then because you had that year on, year off, like one group would make progress and then another group would come in and like change everything that they did. So the flow of it wasn't necessarily the easiest. And then when they tried to prolong your time there, they saw like incidences of PTSD and TBI just kind of go through the roof. So they had to back it off again. So by this time, soldiers are done, right? Like, we've already been at war for 10 years. They just closed down Iraq. They wanted to come out of Afghanistan. So we're welcoming to people who have served in the military to be our commander in chief because they get it. Whereas most people who have never served don't.
Yeah, and I mean, I think a lot of them were also frustrated. Why the hell are we in Iraq anyway? I mean, it had nothing to do with 9/11. Just these WMDs never showed up, and all the reasons why America stormed in there, and some other coalition countries as well, just ended up being and then of course people then question, well, is this again the oil complexes or big industry trying to get resources? I mean, all of that gets pulled out, and I don't know. I feel from the servicemen I talked to, that were through these shows and stuff like that, they really were just frustrated of like, why are my buddies dying in a land so far away for a cause that we don't even know is real? And this sort of frustration just sort of pulled across. Do you think that's still there, this sort of frustration? I mean, this is from 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, I think, again, it just depends on who you talk to. Me personally, I've met many Iraqis and shaken the hands of many, Iraqis who thanked us for coming in, who thanked us for taking out Saddam because he was not a good guy. But I also believe
plenty of bad guys in the world,
Sure, yeah. Well, I'm a big fan of taking all of them out, right? Like, if you're a bad guy, you just got to go. I don't have time for it. But then, I agree, it's a rich man's war. I think that the military gets used in ways that we don't need to, so that people can make, like, the rich stay rich. Those companies that are making it. I was furious. It's not even just in the military. I watched that Netflix, the Gabriel Fernandez trials, and I didn't realize this, that the cities that are like states outsource state resources to private companies, right? So state employees aren't even doing the jobs. They're so like child services and welfare services, and those are all contracted by the same companies who contract war. How crazy is that? Right? Yeah. Why is I forget if it was Boeing or Marquis Larkin?
Yep.
So yeah, one of those guys.
Lockheed Martin.
Yeah, they're making bombs and running child services. How does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. So there. I mean, there's definitely some. definitely some corruption in it.
Mm.
But yes, I think
Well,
people
there's always
have
corruption
mixed
whenever
feelings.
government's involved.
Right.
There's corruption everywhere. Listen, guys, we've got to wrap this up. One final thing. I found Ron Paul's service record. He's not a draft dodger. My man is not a draft dodger. He was in the United States Air Force from 63 to 65 and then 65 to 68 as a captain. And he was also in the Air National Guard and the Texas Air National Guard. So Ron Paul,
Nice.
he ain't no draft dodger. Dang. Anyway, I'd love to talk more about this. Dionna, thanks so much for coming on the show. And I feel like we had like a little bit differing views, and this was such a great conversation. Thank you for being so open and honest with us and like giving us your unadulterated perspective. We'd love to have you on again. Anything you want to plug? We didn't talk about any kind of businesses. By the way, thank you to our sponsor, eToro. We appreciate their support of the show. But like anything that you want to plug, I know I want to have Steve on from GoCoin.
Yeah, Steve's great.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we probably won't talk about business on there either. He's got all sorts of interesting stuff to say. But anything you want to plug before we go?
Yeah, well, of course, GoCoin, right? We're one of the best payment processors out there for crypto. So if you're a merchant and you want to accept crypto, but you don't want to deal with the taxes, volatility, or liquidity issues, just call me up, hit me up, Dionna@GoCoin.com, and I will take care of all your needs for crypto. Anyways, and then of course, go ahead.
I've been going for a long time too, GoCoin. Great company.
Yeah, it's 2013. One of the OGs. Survived it all.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's nexuskids.com, which is a nonprofit computer coding company that helps kids, get in contact with computers and computer coding. And it's such an amazing resource that people don't understand is free. And you can make bank doing it, right? So why go in debt with college when you can start your kids coding now and have them graduate high school with a career in tow?
Wow, what's that called?
Nexuskids.com. It's nxskids.com. We also have all the free resources listed on our website. So if you go to the website, I believe it's the resources tab, you can click on that and it's everything that's for free. And then I think we have it categorized out for the ones that you need to pay for.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Make sure you go check out Volturo. The Tatiana Show airs on Tuesdays at thetatianashow.com. You can also listen to our relationship podcast, Proof of Love, with Stephanie Murphy and Lauren Kasovitz. Proofoflovecast.com is out on Fridays. All this is on the L2B network. We've also got some great, awesome other partner networks where we're syndicating. So make sure you check it out. Thanks, everyone. We'll listen to you next time. No, we won't. We'll just tell you what's going on next time. All right. Peace out, everybody. Stay safe.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Hey there, it's time for the show, the Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto. We gotta think and reflect and use lots of intellect with our hearts when we work together. I know that it can be so hard out there, looking all around and saying that life ain't fair. So that is why we will fight and stay up late at night, listening to the Tatiana Show. The Tatiana Show has been brought to you by CryptoMediaHub.com, a boutique marketing and PR agency for Bitcoin and beyond. Thank you for listening to The Tatiana Show. Please follow us on Twitter at Queen Tatiana or on Facebook and Instagram at Tatiana Moroz Music. More episodes can be found at thetatianashow.com, and make sure you leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends. You are listening to The Tatiana Show. This show may contain adult content, language, and humor and is intended for mature audiences. If that's not you, please stop listening. Nothing you hear on The Tatiana Show is intended as financial advice, legal advice, or really anything other than entertainment. Take everything you hear with a grain of salt. Oh, and if you're listening to us on an affiliate network, the ideas and views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of the network that you're listening on or of any sponsors or any affiliate products you may hear about on this show. Now that that's squared away, let's start the show.